I'm Lauren, and this is Mary, and we are the Ghoul Guides. And today we are bringing to you But Is It Gothic? A show in which one of us will present a case for an issue, topic, text, or other to our co-host and try to convince them that it is in fact Gothic. Mary, today's case is yours.
Okay, and I've been excited about this for a long time. So today's case is The Chilling Adventures of Baphomet. And I am wearing today my Baphomet cameo necklace.
Very
because I have a Baphomet cameo necklace.
Why wouldn't you? I'm wearing a pastel pink floral collared shirt, which is extremely Gothic. Definitely should have dressed more to the occasion. Before we jump into the case, Mary, why don't you explain a little bit about why you chose this one for our first episode?
I'm obsessed with Baphomet, and I think Baphomet is great, and more people should know about Baphomet. And also as you know, as we trace the adventures of Baphomet, you'll find that it's very, very Gothic. So I guess shall we dive in?
Let's dive in. Convince me. Let's go.
Okay. So first of all, you might be thinking, Baphomet, that sounds a bit satanic. I wonder where, I wonder where that comes from. Maybe it's in the Bible, maybe it's in Paradise Lost. Wrong. So basically, the first known record of the name Baphomet is actually in a letter from a Templar knight.
Knight.
Yes, written in 1098. So this Templar knight writes this letter to another Templar knight and talks about Baphomet and the kind of worship that they've been seeing of Baphomet. Scholars pretty much believe that this is actually a misspelling of Muhammad. And the Templar Knights were actually just recording their observations of Islam. But as these things go, so centuries later, who steps in but the Inquisition,
of course.
Who known for not being the most reasonable or nice nice people.
No, not the most measured of religious bodies.
Yeah. So basically they find all these records of the name Baphomet and specifically tied to kind of religious worship, and they're like, what's going on, dudes?
Yeah, where's this coming from? So it starts in the Crusades.
Yeah.
And then we have it recur in the Spanish Inquisition. Okay, that's a pretty strong tick in the Gothic box.
Well, exactly. These are the Gothic foundations. It's basically a kind of cross-century telephone game where you've got like all these false accusations, religious persecution, both real. So obviously the Templar Knights and the Crusades basically slaughtered a load of Jews and Muslims and other people.
Heavily involved in religious persecution and genocide.
And then exactly. And then you have this imagined religious persecution where the Inquisition steps in and start arresting all these Templar Knights because they think that they're committing heresy and they're doing all of this idolatrous worship. And specifically, they think that they're worshipping a bearded deity named Baphomet. I think these are basically the foundations of Baphomet.
Okay, so essentially, someone can't spell.
Yeah.
And it leads to possible devil worship, and then also arrest and torture because of the accusation of possible devil worship. Yeah. I mean, that is pretty Gothic, that kind of miscommunication, that metatextuality. I kind of love that. I kind of love those.
I thought you would.
Kind of like myths and legends that you find out actually. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I do love it when our interests overlap, and Templar Knights are one of my fascinations. Okay, so yeah, we've definitely got a strong early Gothic connection. I like it. Okay, continue.
Okay, so those are its foundations, and basically the kind of the whispers of occultism and heretical worship continued into the 19th century. So in 1818, Austrian historian, and apologies because I'm completely gonna pronounce this person's name wrong, but Austrian historian Joseph Freiherr von Hammer-Purgstall,
Good attempt.
thank you, published his essay called Discovery of the Mystery of Baphomet, by which the Knights Templar, like the Gnostics and Ophites, are convicted of apostasy, of idolatry, of moral impurity by their own monuments.
Ooh,
yeah,
so
right. So basically, Hammer Purgstall's essay created this kind of weird, like, pseudo-history, tying the Templar Knights to Gnosticism and the occult. Arguing that the Templars' head was a Gnostic idol named Baphomet. So it starts to become
history.
Yeah, so it starts to become this very kind of physical, literal history with possible historical and archaeological records, and based on this kind of this truth claim. This is what the Templar Knights were doing. They were devil worshipping, and their god was Baphomet.
I mean, of the many accusations leveled against the Templar Knights, ostensibly a religious order based in the values of chivalry, biblical morality.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the most unrealistic one I've heard. Definitely the most interesting, however.
It's super interesting. But yeah, so of course the accuracy and truth of Hammer Purgstall's work has of course been challenged because it's pseudo history, it's not history. Yeah. But again, I think this feeds into like that kind of tension that surrounds Gothic creation, where what's real and what's false is less important than what's been created.
Yes.
And also, parts have been added, like a kind of Frankensteinian creation.
Yeah,
so
okay.
What Purgstall added is this kind of idea of binaries and a hermaphroditic figure. So it's not just this kind of physical statue or physical idol or something, but it's very much tied to a kind of duality and hermaphrodism.
So we're getting gender subversion as well, essentially.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hitting all these boxes again.
Exactly. It's super interesting the way that like you can see these layers just being added onto this kind of creation. So you have the Templar Knights and the misspelling, and then you have the Inquisition, and then here you have this like amazingly titled essay from Hammer Purgstall, who's adding like you say this gender subversion and pseudo history. Yeah, it's just
so it's kind of like it's kind of rolling through history, gathering more and more and more as it's going, essentially.
Yeah. Which brings us to Elifus Levi. And this is probably the most well-known image of Baphomet. So in the mid-19th century, so just after Hammer Purgstall, French occult author and magician Elifus Levi published two volumes of this work called Dogma and Rituals of High Magic. So again, that sounds pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I would buy those if I saw them on a shelf.
Exactly. So yeah, included in this kind of these volumes is the image of the Sabbatic Goat. So this image basically further tied Baphomet to the occult. And it was actually drawn by Levi himself because he considered Baphomet to be a representation of the absolute in symbolic form. So he kind of takes on this occultism and symbolic kind of layer to Baphomet. He continues the importance of binaries and dualities in Hammer Purgstall's works. And Levi's Sabbatic Goat is half human, half goat, male and female, with one hand pointing up towards the white moon, with a kind of occult hands, and then another one pointing, I can't really do it, but pointing down to the black moon. Yeah, like that. I can't really do that. And basically this humanoid goat is also winged. because
Yeah.
why not?
Why not?
Why not? There's a pentagram on his forehead,
Mm-hmm.
and also a flaming torch on his head.
So I confess, I never knew what that was.
Yeah. So the flaming torch is basically represents, this is according to Levi, the flame of intelligence.
Interesting.
And the magic light of universal balance. So it's all about the kind of dualities and the binaries about balance. And also, if you notice, the rod,
Yes,
in the middle,
the very well placed rod.
Yes. Well, basically, Levi says that the rod standing instead of genitals symbols eternal life.
Because it kind of looks like the rod of Asclepius, right? Like it looks like the so Asclepius is the Greek god of health. And we still use that today as like a medical symbol, the rod with the kind of snakes around it.
with the snakes. And that image of the rod and the snakes is also tied to quite a lot of pre-biblical stories, and kind of, you know, molded into the tree and the snake that you get in Genesis creation accounts. But yeah, that kind of the rod and the serpents, very symbolic. And
so still tying to that health and life and balance then, like in multiple different representations, but
and I think it is important that for later representations of Baphomet, it's important that you notice that not only is there, you know, this rod instead of genitals, but that it definitely has boobs. And it's definitely male and female, both. That's important. But yeah, again, basically what you have here, Baphomet is an incredibly Gothic creation, through the construction of the story, but also through the visual depictions of Baphomet. So obviously Levi's picture is a drawing, but you can still imagine that those kinds of statuesque or physical monuments.
And some stuff kind of coming in from the Gothic idol then. Interesting. So essentially Baphomet's a chimera. Like they have got these multiple features coming from multiple sources. Like not only are they goat and human, male and female, they're also, you know, coming from various different points in history, various different faiths, various different mythologies and stories. Okay, so basically the Sabbatic Goat is a kind of meta chimera.
Absolutely, and a very definitive representation of Baphomet. So I think before it was kind of a bit not wishy-washy, but not necessarily set in stone.
Nothing concrete.
Whereas Levi's picture was incredibly influential, and a lot of people, you know, when you talk about Baphomet, and you want to illustrate Baphomet, that's the one that you go to. It's definitely the image that I would think of if someone said, what does Baphomet look like? Interesting. What an evolution. Right. Okay, so I'm gonna skip through quite a bit now, and jump to my favorite Baphomet.
Okay.
Because of course I have a favorite Baphomet.
That sounds like a children's book. My favorite Baphomet.
My favorite Baphomet. Yeah.
Trademark that now.
Exactly. But yeah, obviously, you know, I have my Baphomet cameo. It won't be any surprise to anyone who knows me, but as well as my interest in religion, I'm really interested in the intersection of the religious and the secular, and the religious and the political, particularly in the tensions that surround these intersections in American
their tensions.
And in American politics, these tensions often manifest through the Establishment Clause, and challenges to the Establishment Clause. So you might be thinking, well, what the hell's the Establishment Clause? Didn't do American politics 101.
The Establishment Clause.
So here's just a little quick explainer. So unlike the UK, America has a codified constitution, which basically means that its constitution is written down, and there's a formal process to add amendments or changes. So the UK constitution is uncodified, which means that, you know, that it's not written down in any one place, and it is also
1688, baby.
Yeah, and it's also based on, we also use like precedents. So anything that's decided in law also gets added to. So it's just complicated.
Yeah, I mean, our constitution is extremely old, and, you know, could do with another look at it, but has its own separate problem.
There are pros and cons to both, but yeah, the American Constitution is codified, and there are obviously a set of amendments, the first of which is known as the Establishment Clause, and it starts off by saying Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then later, in 1802, you get a letter by then President Thomas Jefferson, who says, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. So basically, you know, the Establishment Clause and then Thomas Jefferson's later letter essentially says that church and state need to be kept separate. There should be a wall of separation between them. Church and religion can't interfere with the government, and the government can't interfere with religion. And as long as everything's separate, and the government doesn't establish an official state religion, everything should be fine. So
in theory.
In theory. When does anything ever go right? Okay, so here we're going to briefly segue into an exploration of religious statues in America, and specifically 10 Commandment statues erected in political spaces. So arguably, this goes against the Establishment Clause. I mean, have a courtroom or a school or anything that's
pretty clear.
Oh, you would think so. Yeah.
One would think that separate wall between church and state means don't put religious statues or iconography in government buildings.
Yeah. And obviously statues are rightly a hot topic at the moment. And I think this is tangentially connected. It's still important, but I think if you're looking at a kind of the establishment of a white Christian narrative nation, and that myth of that kind of white Christian nation, I think these monuments are separate and but tangentially connected to that. And okay, so fun fact for anyone wondering why there are so many 10 Commandment statues in America, you can actually blame Hollywood.
Yep. I do know this.
Yeah, and specifically Paramount Films. So basically, as a publicity stunt for their 1956 film, The 10 Commandments, they decided to promote the film by erecting 10 Commandments monuments in political spaces such as courtrooms across America, and these statues resembled their on-screen counterparts. So you might be thinking, oh, they've been there since the creation of America. No, started in the 50s to promote film. But estimates range that there's less than 100 or as many as 2,000 monuments that were erected as part of this project. But also this project is still ongoing today. So you can find lots of kind of states and cities and towns in America that are trying to put up 10 Commandments monuments in kind of courtrooms, all of this kind of stuff. And one such monument, which was until recently standing there, was a 10 Commandments monument at Oklahoma State Capitol. Enter the Satanic Temple.
Here they are.
Yeah. So the Satanic Temple is a non-theistic religious group that, among other things, advocates for the separation of church and state. As an aside, I just think they're really great. and their 7 fundamental tenets are really worth checking out, and you can find them on their website. But anyway,
TST is a genuinely good organization, and important to note, separate from the Church of Satan, because 2 very different organizations, similar ideas, similar ideologies, but TST, pretty damn cool, doing some really good work.
Yeah, I don't have time to go into the history of Satanism in this video, and LaVeyan Satanism and the Church of Satan are really interesting. But yeah, the Satanic Temple is very different, and they're specifically non-theistic, but also they do a lot of political activism, primarily around the separation of church and state, but that often intersects with abortion rights, education, curricular stuff. And they also do like a lot of period drives, and as well as just doing a lot of really great,
very civil and human rights focused.
Yeah.
Which is extremely important at all times, but particularly at the moment.
Yeah, and you can find all of this stuff in a film that came out recently called Hail Satan with a question mark. And that's wonderful, and you should go and check that out.
It's on Netflix, so you have no excuse not to watch it.
so go and watch it and learn more about the Satanic Temple, because they are a really interesting and I think a really good organization.
It's also a really uplifting documentary, because it's really nice to watch a documentary about people doing good work with good intentions, and seeing results. So if you're feeling if you're feeling fatigued by the current state of our global struggle for equality and human rights, check out Hail Satan, because it will make you feel better about the fact that activism actually does change the world. It just kind of sometimes comes in small but significant steps. It will make you feel better.
Plus, Lucian Greaves has amazing taste in sunglasses, so
yes.
But yeah, okay, anyway, this is where we return to Baphomet. So in 2014, the Satanic Temple commissioned an 8.5-foot statue of Baphomet to stand alongside the 10 Commandment statue at Oklahoma State Capitol. So the specific 10 Commandment statue in Oklahoma was actually vandalized, and it's no longer there. So the Satanic Temple's plans were put on hold, because the whole point is that in order to respect the Establishment Clause, there must either be no religious statues, or all religious statues must be welcome, but not one religious statue in isolation. And that was the issue. That's always been the issue from the Satanic Temple's point of view, when you have 10 Commandment statues in isolation, because it essentially promotes Christianity, but no other religions.
So it's basically, trying to stop that narrative of America as a historically solely Christian nation, and particularly like a white evangelical Christian nation, and separating that tie between America as a nation and white Christianity, essentially.
Yeah. And especially, if you go back to those documents, the Establishment Clause and that letter by Jefferson, it specifically talks about not wanting to establish a religion, because they just had a massive rebellion against England, and England, even now our church and state are inextricably linked, and I think we're one of 2 countries who have members of the kind of established state religion. So that's the Church of England here, who are part of our legislature. So there are archbishops and bishops in the House of Lords. And I think, I think there's only one other country that has that. America didn't want that.
I mean, that is incredibly Gothic as well. Like, tensions between religious supremacy, religious occupation, religious states. Even, if you think back to kind of Catholic tensions, if you think about a lot of Scottish Gothic has a lot of, rejection of Church of England, you have a lot of kind of nonconformism and dissenting. That anxiety about faith's place in legislation and faith's place in the governing of society, be it for better or worse, is definitely strongly connected to a number of Gothic traditions. I think of things in particular, Cogg's Confessions of a Justified Sinner.
Yes.
It's kind of rife with those kind of political, social, and religious tensions. So okay, that's another check in the Gothic column.
Another check. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
And yeah, like you say, I mean, even if you go back to the Spanish Inquisition, who were persecuting the Knights Templar for apparently worshipping Baphomet, like again, you have these tensions between different religious identities.
And the Crusades themselves being a holy war.
Yeah, exactly.
And Gothic being founded in a chivalry that was used as the excuse for the Crusades and for like a religious war fought in the name of God and the Son of God, but really was about land and power and money and produce. We're talking like 800 years of Gothic history. I'm buying it. I'm on board.
Okay. So let's turn to the statue itself that they created. So
let's do it.
8.5 glorious feet of Baphomet.
It is pretty glorious,
and it's also hella Gothic. I'm just gonna put that out there. So it was crowdfunded by members and supporters of the Satanic Temple, which I think is important because it does show that it is tied to this community. And again, this community is very much a community of activism and non-theism. And the actual statue itself was created by artist Mark Porter. And as you can see by the finished piece, Levi's Sabbatic Goat was very influential in the creation of this statue. But there are some notable changes and additions. So if you remember, I said, Levi's Sabbatic Goat has boobs. This statue of Baphomet does not have boobs, and it is very much a male human goat monster, as it were. And that was done specifically because they didn't want any kind of arguments about, public decency or sex or gender. So that was a very conscious decision because they wanted the lawsuit that the statue is tied to be entirely about religious statues and not other things. And
that's really important to note, though, because that the fact that this is not about enforcing gender binaries, that this is not about masculinizing deities, that this isn't taking away that complexity of gender and that duality and that,
and you still have
fluidity.
Yes, and the importance of duality and balance is still really important. And basically what they decided to do with that is you have the kind of the boy and girl child who represent that kind of those dualities. And that was also a very conscious decision because, the Satanic Temple have created an activity book for children that they do a lot of education workshops in some of their chapters. So it is some aspects of it are meant to be child friendly. And the kind of physicality of the statue was made so that children could come up and sit on Baphomet. It is a kind of like seat statue. It's meant to be welcoming, and you have these two children. And I think the molds of these children, which again is this will be important, but the children are based on people that the artist knew. I think
they say that in the documentary that they literally cast the face of two children to make the statue.
But it's meant to be a kind of interactive statue, family-friendly statue that's challenging the separation of church and state. And in keeping with Gothic performance and campness, they had this kind of event to unveil the statue. Community crowd-funded statue. It's a big thing in the Satanic community. So the Detroit chapter organized this event, and in order to go, you had to sell your soul to Satan, which I think is just a really nice touch.
I like the drama of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's got all of that campness, all of that performance, but it's good family fun.
Good family fun. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So why is it significant? You mentioned that the presence of these children in this statue is significant. So why is that significant for both the statue and Baphomet and the Gothicness of all of this?
Well, okay. Before I get to that, I just want to get to my last point, which is basically, if you are looking at this statue and thinking, statue looks kind of familiar, have I seen it somewhere before? Maybe in a popular Netflix series. The answer is yes. Yeah. So you can basically see that the Baphomet statue, there is a Baphomet statue that appeared in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And if you've seen it, and especially if you look at a side-by-side comparison of the two, you might notice maybe a few similarities.
I mean, we're looking at them now. I think, you know, I'm not overly familiar with copyright law, but I think there has to be 7 specific points of difference. And I can't say that I can clearly see 7 specific points of difference in these pictures.
Yeah.
The horns may be slightly different shaped.
So I think you can tell that the Satanic Temple's statue of Baphomet is a much better design in terms of the goat's head and all those kinds of little details.
The right arm on the Chilling Adventures statue is not particularly anatomically correct or comfortable.
No.
That's not possible even for a, you know, Sabbatic Goat. I don't think joints work like that.
Yeah. So I basically want to know 3 things. One, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina did not consult the Satanic Temple when they put this incredibly identifiable and copyrighted statue in their show. Cue lawsuit. 2, the show did not do their homework about contemporary Satanism, including the Satanic Temple. So maybe don't put this incredibly identifiable statue that's connected to an activist, political, and non-theistic religious group in your show about cannibalistic Satanism. And also 3, Netflix and the Satanic Temple have settled this lawsuit, and the Satanic Temple is now credited in all episodes that feature the statue. So yeah, that's basically the kind of brief synopsis of the history of the show and the 2 things. But yeah, the inclusion of the children obviously was a big thing because, you know, that's not in Levi's drawing. That was very much part of the Satanic Temple's statue, and also the fact that it's a male human goat figure. It doesn't have boobs. Again, that's part of the Satanic Temple's creative idea. And I think you have that image that's connected to a religious identity that is born out of this. You know, Baphomet. No one owns Baphomet. No one's saying that. It's a Gothic creation. You do what you want with it. But this specific image of Baphomet is tied to this kind of religious political activist group. But also it's a copyrighted piece of art, and you can see that can see that a lot of work has gone into it. And also it's a bronze sculpture. It's a bronze sculpture, and what you see in Sabrina is not a bronze sculpture. So someone's obviously just gone on Google and seen the kind of the not finished version of the statue, and got it. But yeah, I mean, I think super incredibly Gothic, even in that kind of accidental theft, as it were.
Well, I was just about to ask you this. So the Satanic Temple, Satanism is the term that they use because for their political activism, essentially. It's still debatable whether or not Satanism as a satanic worship really exists as a sustained kind of widespread form of worship. However, that being said, I do think it's really maybe funny that Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which uses that kind of like traditional narrative of witches as, you know, being connected to the devil and witch, so that, you know, that's not a new thing that Sabrina takes on, and the comic doesn't. It is very different. It doesn't do the same thing, but I do think it's really funny and maybe more Gothic, that an image that is not about devil worship, not about Satanism or magic or the occult in any way, but is about separation of church and state, about human rights and civil rights, has been now connected to, and obviously in a way that kind of harms what they're doing, but also I just think that is such a Gothic narrative, that's something that now has come back for full circle, and it is now being used as an image that is about devil worship and sacrifice and the occult and the deviant supernatural, because somebody essentially didn't do their homework properly, which takes us right back to a Templar misspelling.
Exactly. You know, Baphomet doesn't exist. Baphomet shouldn't exist. But because of a misspelling, a mistranslation, and then because of like the Inquisition, just you know, getting the wrong end of the stick, and all of this kind of stuff, and then, you know, you have Hammerbergstow and Levi adding on their things, and then you have the Satanic Temple repurposing it, like you say, for that kind of secular activism. And then again, now you have someone who again hasn't done that homework and is reappropriating that kind of back into this narrative of religion, and specifically Satan worship, which is the kind of the Satanism that's depicted in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I think it's just really fascinating. That's what happens to this figure, who's very much a kind of statue or image to be worshipped, or that people think is being worshipped, and how, you know, how the story of this figure happens, but really shouldn't exist at all.
No. Okay, that is okay. I'm pretty sure that I know where my judgment lies, but you presented the case. Let's round it up. Give me your top 3 points that I should keep in mind when I make my judgment about whether or not Baphomet is Gothic.
Okay, so first of all, it's a winged goat monster that's half human, half goat, and has all this crazy dualism stuff.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's pretty undeniable.
Yeah. Then you have this whole like narrative of like Satanism and religious persecution, and this kind of, you know, the whisper networks of that story. And then I just think, you know, it's essentially, Baphomet is essentially a Frankensteinian creation, you know. Yeah. So it's very much, you know, got parts and bits and characteristics and aspects added to it over and over again throughout history. So I think that, as well as Gothic story and Gothic creation. Those are my 2 things.
We've got we've got monstrousness, we've got religion, we've got metatextuality, we've got, you know, the physicality and the appearance, we've got legal battles, we've got questions over authenticity. I think I have to rule that the question, but is Baphomet Gothic, has to be a yes. So, case well presented, Mary. I applaud you. I think we can all agree that Baphomet is incredibly Gothic, no matter which way we look at it. Okay, well, that was today's case, and that is, you know, 1 point to Mary. It is definitely Gothic.
I win. What do I win?
If you would like to know, you win. I don't know what you win: my respect and eternal adoration. Maybe we'll start a score chart of some kind. I don't know. I haven't thought this through that far. Maybe we should be turning this into a competition. So stay tuned. We'll be producing more episodes like this in the coming weeks. So keep coming back to find out what I will be trying to argue next time on But Is It Gothic? And in the meantime, stay safe and stay spooky.